Our State of the U.S. segment tonight, Newsweek published what could have been one of the worst articles I've read this week. The topic is the Black Lives Matter movement. In the article, Newsweek writer Janice Williams insinuates that anybody who doesn't support the Black Lives Matter movement is racist, of course. That Blue Lives Matter and All Lives Matter are essentially anti-black movements, and that the number of people killed by police every year is entirely due to race and injustice, and has nothing to do with crimes being committed by the victims at the time of the shooting. Listen, this kind of article, this is what's wrong with the political dialogue in our nation. It's dangerous to make this kind of unfounded accusation that does stir up racial divide in America. We've seen the violent riots, the burning, the looting, the vandalism, even the killing that's resulted from inaccurate and irresponsible rhetoric, like the rhetoric Williams uses in her article. Instead, let's actually talk about some real facts. With me now to do that, former spokesperson for the Trump campaign Youth Vote, Salvador Lamastre V. Sal, good to see you.
Good to see you, Liz.
Sal, this article, like I said, was one of the worst articles I've read this week because it essentially castigates any person who has an issue with the Black Lives Matter movement as being a racist. Sal, as you know, being called a racist in our nation is one of the worst insults possible. The Black Lives Matter movement is not actually a movement based off of racial unity. It's a movement entirely based on the idea of creating anarchy and using race as a dividing factor to achieve that.
Exactly, and you're right on the point. I mean, let's not give too much credit to Newsweek as well. I mean, I don't know if you've seen their latest cover, but they have Donald Trump on the front and a lazy boy with the title "Lazy Boy." What a bored and tired president we have. So this isn't a great organization. They're not going to publish anything with facts. They're going to work on dividing the nation, as most of the journalists have in this country since Trump has been elected. But Black Lives Matter is a group that I think is misdirected. I'm here in Dallas. Just over a year ago, we just had a memorial for it. We had a bunch of police officers who were attacked and some killed. And just after that happened, if you looked at all the stations and people who had these Black Lives Matter leaders on and other people like Al Sharpton, sorry, they refused to condemn the shootings of these police officers. And so you're looking at a group, the Black communities around the country, they have high unemployment, low graduation rates, high crime, high drug use. And I think this is misdirected. I mean, if you don't want to look at what's happening to yourself, you're going to blame others. And right now, they want to blame race for all their problems. And I don't think that's the right way to go.
Right, and I do separate, I guess, the people who have turned out at these protests versus the leaders of this movement. There are some valid concerns. You named a number of the valid concerns: unemployment rates, graduation rates, the rate of violence that we see in inner cities, the crime rates committed by black youth. I mean, those are all very valid concerns. And then there is and there has been in our nation injustice that has been waged against black people. Those are valid concerns. And a lot of the people who came out to these protests, I think, came out sincerely because they thought, they felt that they were being oppressed or they felt that they were being targeted. But the fact of the matter is a lot of these people were being used by these leaders who wanted to use that kind of anger, who wanted to incite people. That's the part that I find dangerous, to tell someone that they're being targeted because of their skin color in order to cause anger within them, to get the people to riot in the streets and destroy the institutions of our nation. There's a reason. There was a new poll from Harvard-Harris study that said that 57% of Americans do not view the Black Lives Matter movement positively. This is not a small racist strand of people who are against the Black Lives Matter movement. The American people, a majority, as we can see, of the American people see it for what it is, and that is not racist.
Exactly. And like you said, that these aren't protests that are happening or rallies going on around the country. They're riots. And these people are using people who, might be unemployed or low graduation rates or dealing with issues in their own community to say, this is because you're black, this is happening. And that makes people mad, and that gets them to riot. And it's not fair to other people in this country, not fair to their own communities. And so, something has to be done here. We have to stop letting people like this journalists in Newsweek and others promote this kind of behavior. And it's only going to, change until we can have, an honest conversation in this country, until, we can really have someone who can go into these communities and speak to them. And I hope, like we saw during the campaign, that Donald Trump is able to hopefully break that divide. And once we get through all this other craziness that's happening right now in the administration, that as things move on, he'll be able to bridge that gap and we'll be able to have an honest conversation.
I certainly hope so, because like I said, I was almost appalled when I read this article, and I do want to call out the author of it because I think it's disrespectful to the African American community in our nation to write things. And I want to read this directly from the article. She writes, despite the Black Lives Matter movement's efforts to bring awareness to the plight of being black in America. I mean, Sal, that's just disrespectful to act like because you have a certain skin color at this point in our nation that you are suffering a plight. She then goes on to compare that. Despite their efforts, 70% of voters in our nation said that black-on-black crime in African American communities was a bigger issue than police violence against African Americans. Those two things are not counterbalanced.
Exactly. And like you, I'm a doctor. I deal in facts. I've spent my whole career in, educational career studying facts and statistics and using those to solve things. And if you look at the facts and statistics in this country, it is black on black crime. That is the major problem when it comes to violence and issues in the African American community. So to act like this is all an issue of police violence is absolutely ridiculous. And it only perpetuates the issues going on.
Right, right. And then to go on one step further, and this is the last part of this article that we'll cover before we have completely debunked it and put it to rest here. She insinuates in this article that the Blue Lives Matter movement, that's obviously about law enforcement and all lives matter, saying that all lives matter. It doesn't matter your race, your characteristic, your gender, your age, all lives matter. She calls them race-related support groups and insinuates that they're anti-black. I don't understand how you can sit there and accuse someone of being racist towards you when you're sitting there and calling anyone who doesn't agree with you racist.
Exactly. It's just ridiculous. Just in what she said, what you wrote, what you said there is ridiculous. She doesn't want to, I guess, address the major issues going on in this country. And it's sad that we have people like this who are blatantly ignoring the facts, who blatantly ignore common sense in order to perpetuate this story.
Right, and who selectively choose statistics to back up their own agenda when it's not painting a full picture. And I would call Ms. Williams out for doing that when she cites a statistic of how many people were shot by police last year without specifying whether those were justified or unjustified. She then delineates that number by race, but she again foregoes to say how many of those people were committing a crime or the crime rate based off the crime rate of different demographics in our nation. It paints an entirely different picture. She was picking and choosing statistics to back up her agenda, neglecting to use the facts, and that's intellectually dishonest.